3 years into my marriage, I genuinely believed Ethan and I had figured adulthood out. We had matching coffee mugs lined up on our kitchen counter, a shared Spotify playlist full of songs we both pretended to like, and a mortgage that made us feel both accomplished and permanently anxious at the same time. From the outside, we were stable, predictable, safe. I'm a financial analyst, calm, organized, the kind of woman who color codes budgets and feels an unreasonable amount of joy when spreadsheets balance perfectly. I like order. I like clarity. I like knowing where every dollar goes and why. Ethan was the ambitious one, a marketing executive with a voice that could turn a mediocre campaign into something that sounded like it deserved a standing ovation. He had that easy charisma, the kind that filled a room before he even spoke. People followed him, admired him, especially at work. And then there was his boss, Gregory Mitchell, silver hair styled within an inch of its life, tailored suits sharp enough to cut glass. The kind of man who said words like vision and synergy as if they were personality traits. He praised Ethan constantly, texted him at 11 p.m. about font choices, called him at midnight about urgent strategy shifts. "It's just work," Ethan would say whenever I glanced at his glowing phone screen. "Gregory values my input." Maybe he did. But there's a difference between professional respect and emotional trespassing. The first time I saw Gregory look at my husband, the way someone looks at something they're trying to own, not manage, something inside me tightened. And that night, under dim restaurant lights, with wine glasses clinking and forced laughter filling the air, when he suggested I wasn't good enough for my own marriage, that was the moment I stopped being the quiet wife. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just attending a dinner. I was attending the beginning of the end. Before Gregory Mitchell became the background noise in my marriage, before late-night strategy calls and champagne-drenched client dinners, there was just Ethan and me. I met Ethan at a mutual friend's birthday party 5 years ago. I was standing in the kitchen explaining compound interest to someone who very clearly did not ask, holding a glass of cheap wine, when he laughed, not at me, but with me. "You make spreadsheets sound romantic," he said, leaning casually against the counter. "And you look like someone who's never balanced a budget in your life," I replied. He grinned. "Marketing. We don't balance things, we spin them." That was our rhythm from the beginning. Logic and charm, structure and spark. He liked that I was grounded. I liked that he was bold. He told me I made him feel steady. I told him he made me feel brave. We dated for 2 years. Nothing dramatic, no screaming fights, no broken phones, just weekend road trips, shared grocery lists, Sunday mornings with burnt pancakes and too much coffee. He proposed on a quiet beach at sunset, nervous, fumbling with the box like he was presenting quarterly results. "I don't want a life that doesn't have you in it," he said, voice shaking. He bought the ring himself, saved for months. I remember the way his hands trembled when he slid it onto my finger. It felt real, earnest. We married the following spring, small ceremony, white roses. My father crying discreetly into a napkin he pretended was for allergies. The first year was easy. We were still newlyweds, still learning each other's habits. I learned he left cabinet doors open when distracted. He learned I'd triple-check locks before bed. By year 2, we bought a townhouse together. The mortgage terrified us in equal measure. We celebrated by eating takeout on the floor before the furniture arrived. Year 3 was when his career accelerated. Gregory promoted him to lead a major campaign. Suddenly, Ethan was indispensable. Suddenly, there were late nights, weekend brainstorming sessions, team-building dinners that felt more like private mentorships. At first, I was proud. "He sees something in me," Ethan said one night, excitement lighting up his face. "He says I have executive presence." I smiled. "That's amazing." And I meant it. But admiration slowly turned into dependency. Gregory didn't just mentor him, he hovered. Texts during dinner, calls during movies, Emails marked urgent about color palettes at midnight. The first time I heard Gregory's voice on speaker, it was 11:47 p.m. "Ethan, buddy," Gregory said smoothly. "Need your brain on something real quick?" Real quick lasted 45 minutes. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while my husband sat in the living room, whispering strategy like national security depended on it. When he returned, I asked lightly, "Does your boss ever sleep?" "It's high stakes," he said. "You wouldn't understand. Marketing's different from finance." That was the first time the word stung. You wouldn't understand. I noticed other things too. The way Ethan's phone angled slightly away from me when he texted. The way he defended Gregory before I even criticized him. The way he lit up when his name appeared on the screen. Once, at breakfast, I caught him smiling at his phone. "Good news?" I asked casually. "Just work stuff," he said quickly, locking the screen. Work stuff. At 7:30 a.m. with emojis. I told myself I was being paranoid. Corporate culture is weird now. Boundaries blur. That's what I repeated like a mantra. But I also noticed something else. Gregory didn't just admire Ethan's work. He admired Ethan. And that kind of admiration rarely stays professional. Still, I chose silence. Marriage, I believed, meant trust. It meant picking battles wisely. It meant not turning every uneasy feeling into a war. I didn't know yet that silence can be mistaken for permission. And I definitely didn't know that my patience was about to be tested in a room full of expensive wine and cheaper loyalty. The shift didn't happen all at once. It crept in quietly, subtle, like smoke before you see flames. At first, it was just frequency. Gregory's name lighting up Ethan's screen became as common as the weather app. During dinner, during movies, during conversations where I was mid-sentence. Buzz. Ethan would glance down automatically. "Sorry," he'd murmur, already typing. One evening, I was describing a potential investment strategy I'd been proud of finalizing. I'd spent weeks modeling different projections. I was excited, which for me is saying something. Buzz. His eyes dropped to his phone. He smiled. Not polite smile. Not professional smile. The soft kind. The involuntary kind. I stopped talking, mid-sentence. "Is it urgent?" I asked. Calm, neutral. "It's just Gregory," he said quickly. "We're aligning messaging for a client launch." At 9:40 p.m., he sighed. "Olivia, you know how this works. Big accounts don't sleep." I nodded slowly, but something in my chest felt displaced. Another night, he came home late, almost midnight. Jacket wrinkled, energy buzzing. "Celebration dinner," he explained while loosening his tie. Gregory wanted to debrief after the presentation. "Debrief?" I repeated softly. "Or celebrate?" He paused for half a second. Too brief for most people to notice. Not brief enough for me. "Both," he said. He kissed my forehead. I smelled cologne that wasn't his. Sharp. Expensive. The same scent Gregory wore. I didn't accuse him, not then. I asked instead, "Did anyone else stay late?" "It was just leadership," he answered. "You're reading into things again." Again. The word carried weight, like I had a history of overreacting. I started observing patterns. That's what I do. I analyze. I track. I connect dots. Gregory texted most heavily on weekends. Gregory called during emotional moments, after arguments, after stressful days. Gregory praised Ethan excessively at work events, not just professionally, personally. "You're a natural," I once overheard Gregory say at a company brunch. "The kind of man who commands a room." He said it while resting a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Too long. Too familiar. I watched Ethan absorb that validation like oxygen. That's when I realized something uncomfortable. This wasn't about attraction in the physical sense. There was no romantic relationship between them. This was about ego. Gregory fed it, and Ethan craved it. One Saturday morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Ethan already dressed, phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I'll meet you there," he was saying quietly. He saw me and turned slightly away. "Everything okay?" I asked after he hung up. "Gregory wants to run through some messaging before Monday," he said. "It'll only take a couple hours." "On Saturday?" He grabbed his keys. "This is how you grow in this industry." Grow. The word echoed in my mind long after the door closed behind him. Later that afternoon, I passed his open laptop on the dining table. A message preview flashed on the screen before dimming. Gregory, couldn't have done last night without you. You were exceptional. Exceptional. Not the campaign. You. I didn't open the message. I didn't need to. Instead, I poured myself a glass of water and stood in our kitchen staring at the framed wedding photo on the wall. Ethan was looking at me like I was his entire future. Now he looked at his phone that way. The tension between us didn't explode. It tightened. Quietly. Dinners grew shorter. Conversations became logistical instead of intimate. How was your day? Fine. You? Busy. I caught myself counting how many times he smiled at his screen versus at me. The phone won. Every time. One evening, I finally said it. Do you think Gregory respects our marriage? Ethan blinked at me, genuinely confused. What kind of question is that? A serious one. He laughed softly. He's my boss, Liv, not a threat. Sometimes threats don't look like what we expect, I said. He shook his head. You're jealous. That word again. Jealous. I felt something inside me go still. I'm not jealous, I replied evenly. I'm observant. He rolled his eyes. You're making this bigger than it is. Maybe I was. But I've learned something about patterns in numbers and in people. When something repeats consistently, it's not random. It's a signal, and I was starting to see the signal clearly. The only question left was how loud it needed to get before Ethan heard it too. The night everything cracked open wasn't dramatic at first. It was dressed in sequins and soft lighting. Gregory's Client Appreciation Gala was held at an upscale steakhouse downtown. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices, and the waiters move like they're part of a ballet. Ethan had been buzzing about it all week. It's important, he'd said, while adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror. Big client, big visibility. For you? I asked. For the team, he corrected, but there was pride in his smile. I wore a navy silk dress. Elegant, controlled. I didn't want to compete with the room. I just wanted to observe it. The moment we walked in, Gregory spotted Ethan like a lighthouse spotting a ship. Ethan, he called, voice booming across the private dining room. There he is. He approached with that polished executive swagger, wine glass already in hand. His silver hair was immaculate. His suit looked custom-tailored by someone who charged by the ego. Olivia, he said, turning to me with a tight smile. Lovely to see you again. Gregory, I replied calmly. Then he turned fully toward Ethan. You look sharp tonight. Ready to impress? His hand lingered briefly on Ethan's back as they laughed. I felt it again. That subtle invasion. That ownership masked as mentorship. Dinner began. Small talk, corporate flattery, laughter that felt slightly too loud. Halfway through the meal, Gregory stood to make a toast. To vision, he began dramatically. To leadership. And to the people who make this company exceptional. His gaze settled on Ethan like a spotlight. No one embodies that more than Ethan Parker. The man is relentless, brilliant, a future executive if I've ever seen one. Applause erupted around the table. Ethan looked proud, radiant, almost boyish. Gregory lifted his glass toward me next. And Olivia, he added with a smirk, you're a lucky woman. A few guests chuckled politely. I smiled faintly. Gregory wasn't done. Honestly, he continued, wine loosening his restraint, with Ethan's trajectory, Olivia, you might want to step up your game. He could do better. The room went silent. Forks paused mid-air. Someone coughed into a napkin. My pulse slowed instead of quickened. A strange calm washed over me. The kind you feel right before you decide something irreversible. Ethan's face flushed. Gregory, he muttered, embarrassed. That's not... But Gregory waved him off casually. No offense, of course. Just saying. When a man rises like this, options expand. Options. My marriage reduced to an investment portfolio. I set my glass down carefully. Gregory, I said softly. He looked at me, amused. Yes? You're absolutely right. He blinked. I am? Yes, I continued, leaning back in my chair. Ethan could do better. Ethan turned sharply toward me. Olivia, but let's define better, I added calmly. Better than a woman who stood beside him before promotions, before visibility, before you started texting him at midnight? A ripple of discomfort moved through the table. Gregory's smile thinned. "You're misunderstanding professional mentorship," he replied smoothly. "I understand boundaries very well," I said. "It's kind of my specialty." He chuckled lightly. "You're being emotional." There it was. The word men use when women refuse to be small. "No," I said evenly. "I'm being precise." I met his gaze directly. "You don't get to evaluate my marriage. You don't get to insinuate my husband has options. And you definitely don't get to blur lines and call it leadership." The air felt electric. Ethan shifted uncomfortably beside me. Gregory leaned back, jaw tightening. "I think," he said carefully, "you might be threatened by Ethan's success." I laughed quietly. "Success doesn't threaten me. Disrespect does." My hands were steady. My voice didn't waver. "You praise him like he's yours," I continued. "You text him like he owes you emotional access. And now you publicly suggest he should upgrade his wife." A junior associate stared down at her plate. One of the clients avoided eye contact completely. Gregory's charm mask slipped for just a second. "You're crossing a line," he said. "No," I replied. "You did." Ethan whispered urgently, "Olivia, please." I turned to him slowly. "Do you agree with him?" The question hung between us. His silence lasted 2 seconds too long. Gregory smirked faintly. That was the moment I felt something inside me shift permanently. Not rage, not heartbreak. Clarity. I picked up my purse. "I hope the steak is worth it," I said calmly. Then I stood. "Enjoy the rest of your evening." I didn't storm out. I didn't cry. I walked away with measured steps, heels steady against marble flooring. Behind me, I heard Gregory murmur something about overreaction. I didn't look back because I already knew. This wasn't about one comment. This was about a pattern, and I had just drawn the first boundary out loud. Ethan came home 40 minutes after I did. I was sitting on the edge of our bed, still in my navy dress, heels off, makeup slightly smudged but not ruined. I hadn't cried. I hadn't yelled. I was thinking. He walked in quietly, closing the bedroom door behind him like he was entering a hospital room. "Olivia," he began carefully, loosening his tie. "You didn't have to do that." I looked up at him slowly. "Do what?" "Make a scene." I let out a soft, humorless laugh. "A scene?" I repeated. "Your boss suggested you could do better than your wife in front of clients. And I made a scene?" He rubbed his forehead. He was joking. "No," I said evenly. He wasn't. Silence filled the room. Ethan paced once, twice. "You embarrassed him." I defended our marriage. "You made it awkward for everyone." "It was already awkward," I replied. I just said it out loud. His jaw tightened. "You don't understand how this works." There it was again, that phrase. "You're right," I said quietly. "Explain it to me. Help me understand how your boss publicly undermining your wife is part of career advancement." He exhaled sharply. "It's optics, power dynamics. He pushes people. That's how he operates." "And you accept that?" "It's how you survive in that environment." I stood slowly, facing him. "I didn't marry survival mode, Ethan." His eyes flickered. For a second, just a second, I saw something vulnerable there. "I can't afford to alienate him," he admitted quietly. "Not right now. I'm this close to a senior position." He held his fingers barely apart. "So my dignity is negotiable?" I asked softly. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It's not." The room felt smaller than usual. "I've supported you through every late night," I continued. "Every weekend strategy session. Every 11 p.m. call. I didn't complain. I trusted you. And I haven't done anything wrong," he insisted quickly. "I didn't say you cheated," I replied calmly. His shoulders stiffened. "But something is off," I added. "And instead of addressing it, you're protecting him." He looked at me like I'd accused him of something unspeakable. "You're making this bigger than it is." I felt that familiar tightening in my chest. "I asked you one question at dinner," I said quietly. "Do you agree with him?" He didn't answer immediately. That silence was louder than anything Gregory had said. "I just think," he began, stopping himself. You could have handled it differently. How? Privately. So he humiliates me publicly and I respond privately? That's maturity. No, I said softly. That's conditioning. He stared at me. You're turning this into a war, he said. I didn't start one, I replied, but I won't pretend it's not happening. The space between us felt charged. I need you to tell me something honestly, I said after a moment. He didn't respond, but he was listening. Does his approval matter more to you than my comfort? His face changed slightly. Subtle, but noticeable. That's not a fair comparison. It is, I said, because tonight when he crossed a line, you defended him. I defended my career, and in doing that, I whispered, you left me standing alone at that table. He looked away. The quiet stretched long. I stepped back, picking up my heels from the floor. I'm not your competition, I said softly. I'm your wife. He swallowed. I need time, he said. Time. The universal placeholder for avoidance. I nodded slowly. Take it, I replied. That night, we slept on opposite sides of the bed. Not physically separated, just emotionally distant. His breathing was steady. Mine wasn't. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning above us and replayed the dinner in my head. Gregory's smirk, Ethan's hesitation, the applause, and then something else settled into place. Something colder. I wasn't just reacting to disrespect. I was reacting to realization. This wasn't about jealousy. It wasn't about insecurity. It was about erosion. Slow, subtle erosion of boundaries. And I had just seen how far it had already gone. The next morning, Ethan left for work early without kissing me goodbye. He texted instead. We'll talk tonight. I stared at the message. Short, neutral, controlled. I didn't reply, because for the first time in 3 years, I wasn't worried about fixing this immediately. I was evaluating it, and evaluation is the first step before decision. That evening, Ethan didn't come home at his usual time. 7 o'clock passed, then 8, then 9. At 9:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. Still at the office, long meeting, no apology. No explanation. I stared at the text for a long moment before setting my phone down on the coffee table. The house felt unusually quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but hollow. When he finally walked in at 10:42 p.m., he looked wired, energized. We talked, he said immediately, dropping his keys on the counter. We? I asked. Gregory and I. I leaned back against the couch. Of course, he exhaled. He feels blindsided. By consequences? I replied evenly. By the hostility. I laughed softly. Hostility. That's what we're calling boundaries now? Ethan ran a hand through his hair. You made him look inappropriate. He made himself look inappropriate. He says you misinterpreted the situation. And you? I asked. He hesitated again. Just enough. He thinks you're insecure about my growth. There it was. The narrative had already shifted. Interesting, I murmured. Did he also analyze our marriage during this meeting? Olivia, don't twist this. I'm not twisting anything, I said calmly. I'm watching it unfold. He stepped closer. You embarrassed me too. That landed harder than anything else. Embarrassed you, I repeated quietly. Yes, he said, in front of clients, in front of leadership. You made it look like I can't control my own household. I felt something inside me go very still. My household? I asked softly. You know what I mean. No, I replied. Explain it. He stopped speaking. Because what he meant was clear. Gregory had reframed the story. I wasn't a wife defending her marriage. I was a liability. 2 days later, the tension escalated beyond our home. Ethan's mother called. Olivia, she began in that syrupy voice she used when she was about to criticize politely. Ethan told us there was some scene at a work dinner. I closed my eyes briefly. Yes, I said calmly. You have to understand how fragile career advancement is, she continued. Men in those positions are sensitive. Sensitive? I repeated. Yes, powerful men don't like being challenged publicly. I let the silence sit there intentionally. So I should have smiled and nodded, I asked. You should have supported your husband. I inhaled slowly. I did, I replied. I supported his dignity. She sighed. Ethan works very hard. You don't want to jeopardize that. The implication was clear. I was jeopardy, not Gregory's behavior. Mine. After that call, something shifted permanently inside me. This wasn't just about one dinner. This was about a system of enabling. Gregory blurred boundaries. Ethan absorbed validation. His family prioritized image, and I was expected to stay quiet for stability. That weekend, Ethan attended another strategy session. I didn't ask questions. I didn't argue. I observed. When he returned late that night, I noticed something new. He smelled like the same cologne again. Gregory's. Not faintly. Strong. You hugged him goodbye? I asked lightly. He blinked. What? You smell like him. He laughed awkwardly. It's probably the restaurant. I nodded slowly. Maybe it was. Or maybe mentorship had turned into something more psychological than either of them wanted to admit. The following week, I received an unexpected message. It was from Clara, one of the junior associates in Ethan's department. We'd spoken briefly at company events before. Can we talk? Privately? My pulse quickened slightly. We met at a quiet cafe near my office during lunch. Clara looked nervous. I don't want to cause trouble, she began, but you deserve to know something. I didn't interrupt. Gregory has a pattern, she continued carefully. He gets very attached to rising male executives, especially the charismatic ones. I kept my face neutral. Attached how? I asked. Not romantic, she clarified quickly, but intense. He isolates them, praises them publicly, undermines their partners privately, makes them feel like he's the only reason they're succeeding. My chest tightened. Has this happened before? I asked. She nodded. Twice. Both times the marriages didn't survive. That sentence hung heavy between us. What happened to those executives? I asked. They burned out, she said quietly, or left, once Gregory lost interest. I thanked her for her honesty. When I walked back to my car, my hands were steady, not shaking. Steady. Because now the pattern wasn't just emotional. It was documented. That night, I didn't confront Ethan. I watched him instead. Watched how quickly he responded to Gregory's texts. Watched how he defended him reflexively. Watched how he minimized me. And I realized something painful. This wasn't about infidelity. It was about allegiance. Ethan wasn't cheating on me with another woman. He was emotionally outsourcing validation to a man who thrived on control. And the more Gregory fed his ego, the less room there was for me. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me clear. And clarity is far more dangerous than anger. Because anger reacts. Clarity decides. The lowest point didn't arrive with shouting. It arrived quietly. 3 nights after my conversation with Clara, I waited for Ethan at the dining table. No candles, no confrontation prepared, just silence. He came home after 11. He looked tired, but not drained. Wired again. Charged. Long day, he muttered, hanging his jacket. I studied him carefully. I spoke to someone from your office, I said calmly. He froze slightly. Who? Clara. His jaw tightened immediately. Why would she talk to you? She was concerned. About what? About Gregory. The air shifted. Ethan's face changed. Not to confusion, not to curiosity. Defensiveness. You went behind my back? He asked. I blinked slowly. Behind your back? You're digging for problems, he continued. You're making this worse. I'm trying to understand what's happening. Nothing is happening. I stood up. Clara says this is a pattern, I said quietly. Gregory isolates rising executives, creates dependency, undermines their partners. That's ridiculous, Ethan snapped. Is it? Yes. Then why does he keep inserting himself into our marriage? He doesn't. He publicly suggested you could do better. That was a joke. It wasn't. You're obsessed with that dinner, he said sharply. I felt the words land like a slap. I'm not obsessed, I replied, voice steady but softer now. I'm hurt. Silence. He looked at me, but not the way he used to, not fully present. You don't see it, I whispered. You don't see how he talks about me, how he positions himself between us. "You're making me choose," he said. I swallowed. "No," I said quietly. "He is." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," he said. "This is the biggest opportunity of my career." "And I'm what?" I asked. "Collateral?" "That's unfair." "So is this," I replied. He walked toward the kitchen, distancing himself physically. "I need support right now," he said, without turning around. "I've been supporting you for 3 years," I answered. He didn't respond. That was the moment I felt it. Not anger, not even betrayal. Loneliness. A deep, hollow loneliness that settled behind my ribs. Because it wasn't Gregory who broke my heart. It was the realization that my husband didn't see the fracture forming. He was too busy climbing, and I was no longer climbing with him. That night, I slept on the couch. Not dramatically. Not to punish him. Just because I couldn't lie next to someone who felt so far away. At 2:13 a.m., I woke up to the faint glow of his phone lighting the hallway. He was whispering. "I know," he said softly. "She's just overthinking." A pause. "No, it's handled." My stomach dropped. Handled. I didn't need to hear the other side of the conversation. I already knew who it was. I lay back down on the couch, staring at the ceiling in the dark. Tears finally came. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet. Because the worst part wasn't that he was speaking to Gregory. It was that he was speaking about me, reducing my instincts to paranoia, my boundaries to overreaction, my pain to inconvenience. The next morning, I moved slowly through the house. He acted normal, too normal. "Kiss me goodbye?" he asked lightly. I stepped back just slightly. "I need space," I said. His face hardened. "You're punishing me." "No," I replied gently. "I'm protecting myself." He grabbed his keys, frustration visible. "I can't keep fighting this," he said. Neither can I thought. But I didn't say it out loud. After he left, I walked through our townhouse slowly, past the framed wedding photo, past the couch we picked together, past the kitchen where we once celebrated paying off our first major loan. Everything looked intact. But it felt concluded, not explosive, just eroded. That afternoon, I sat alone at my desk at work and stared at a spreadsheet that refused to focus. And for the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself to consider something I had avoided completely. What if I wasn't fighting for my marriage anymore? What if I was fighting to avoid admitting it was already shifting into something unrecognizable? The loneliness didn't feel like heartbreak. It felt like clarity settling in slowly. And clarity can be colder than grief. Because grief mourns what was lost. Clarity acknowledges what is. And what was us against the world had quietly turned into me against his ambition. That night, I didn't wait for him to come home. I locked the door at 10, not out of spite, out of finality. The turning point didn't arrive with a scream. It arrived with an email, Monday morning, 8:12 a.m. Subject line, HR meeting, mandatory attendance. Not addressed to me, to Ethan. He stared at his phone for a long time before speaking. "They're reviewing internal conduct policies," he muttered. "Probably routine." I didn't respond, because I knew something he didn't. The night before, I had made a decision. I had not stormed into Gregory's office. I had not threatened anyone. I had not created drama. I had compiled facts, expense reports showing repeated client dinners at the same private restaurant, no client names attached. Reimbursement claims filed after midnight meetings that only listed 2 attendees. Company policy excerpts regarding executive conduct and favoritism. And one particularly careless voicemail Gregory had once left Ethan. Speakerphone on, accidentally recorded by Ethan's smartwatch when he tried to silence it. "Don't let your wife limit your trajectory," Gregory's voice had said smoothly. "You're meant for bigger circles." I didn't leak gossip. I submitted documentation anonymously. Not out of revenge, out of precision. That afternoon, Ethan came home pale. "They suspended him," he said quietly. I set down my pen. "Suspended who, Gregory?" My heart didn't race. It steadied. "For what?" I asked. "Multiple complaints. Favoritism, boundary violations, conflict of interest." I held his gaze. "And?" They're reviewing team members too. There it was. The fear. They think I was involved, he said, that I benefited. Did you? I asked gently. He looked away. I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't ask that. Silence. 2 days later, it escalated. Gregory was placed on indefinite leave pending investigation. Internal rumors exploded across LinkedIn and office group chats. Ethan stopped sleeping. He paced at night. They think someone leaked documentation, he said one evening. He thinks it was you. I didn't flinch. Did he say that? He said you've always been observant. A small exhale left my lungs. Observant. You told him I spoke to Clara, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. You trusted him with that, I continued. He's my boss, Ethan replied defensively. He was your boss. The correction hung heavy in the room. The next morning, Ethan received another email. Temporary reassignment. Leadership review. Performance evaluation. Not termination, but no promotion. No fast track. No executive path. He sat at the kitchen table staring at his laptop like it had betrayed him. This wasn't supposed to happen, he whispered. I watched him carefully. Supposed to? I asked. I was doing everything right. For who? I asked softly. He didn't answer, because somewhere, deep down, he knew. That night he confronted me. Did you report him? His voice wasn't angry. It was exhausted. I met his eyes steadily. I submitted documentation about inappropriate executive conduct, I said calmly. His face fell. You did? Yes. You ruined everything. No, I replied evenly. I exposed something already unstable. He was my mentor. He was manipulating you. He believed in me. He needed you dependent. His breathing grew heavier. You couldn't let me handle it, he said. You weren't handling it, I answered quietly. You were defending it. The truth settled between us like dust after collapse. I didn't do it to hurt you, I added. I did it because he crossed lines, and you were too invested to see it. He sat down slowly. I lost my promotion. I nodded. Yes. He looked up at me then. Not with anger, with something closer to realization. I lost you first, didn't I? The question cracked something open. You started losing me when you chose his approval over my comfort, I said softly. Silence. For the first time in months, he looked small, not ambitious, not charismatic, just human. They're going to let him go, he said quietly. And you? I asked. They're keeping me, he answered. But the trajectory, it's gone. I nodded slowly. Sometimes correction costs momentum. He swallowed hard. Was I blind? He asked. I didn't answer immediately. You were flattered, I said gently, and flattery is powerful. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. I thought you were jealous, he admitted. I was warning you, I replied. That night we didn't argue. We didn't reconcile either. We sat across from each other at the same table where we once celebrated paying off our first debt. But now the debt was emotional and far heavier. The turning point wasn't Gregory's suspension. It was Ethan finally seeing the pattern. But awareness doesn't automatically rebuild trust. It just clarifies damage. And clarity, once it arrives, doesn't go away. Gregory Mitchell was officially terminated 2 weeks later. The company sent a sterile email about leadership restructuring and commitment to professional boundaries. His LinkedIn profile changed overnight from senior executive visionary to strategic consultant, open to opportunities. Corporate language for unemployed. But the real fallout wasn't public. It was personal. Ethan didn't celebrate Gregory's removal. He mourned it. Not the man, the momentum. They'll never see me the same way now, he said one evening, staring at nothing in particular. Who? I asked. Leadership, the board, everyone. I folded my hands calmly. Because you were closely aligned with someone who crossed lines. He winced. They think I was complicit. Were you? He didn't answer, because complicity isn't always active participation. Sometimes it's silent endorsement. At work, Ethan was reassigned to a different department. No longer Gregory's rising star. No longer the golden protege. At home, the silence between us became heavier. One night, he finally said it. You chose destroying him over protecting me. I looked at him steadily. I chose protecting us, I replied, but it cost me everything. No, I said softly. It cost you a fantasy. He stood up abruptly, pacing. I was finally moving forward. At what price? I asked. My future. And what about our present? He stopped moving. The truth was simple, and simplicity can be brutal. His ambition had required compromise, and I had refused to be part of that compromise. 2 days later, his mother called again. This could have been handled quietly, she said sharply this time. It was handled legally, I replied calmly. You embarrassed him. No, I corrected. Gregory embarrassed himself. Ethan ignored the warning signs. She exhaled in frustration. You've changed. No, I said gently. I stopped staying silent. After that call, something inside me settled permanently. There was no dramatic fight, no screaming match, just clarity hardening into decision. One Sunday morning, I packed a small suitcase, not in anger, in acceptance. Ethan watched from the doorway of our bedroom. Where are you going? He asked quietly. I signed a lease yesterday, I replied. His face paled. You're leaving. I'm creating space. For how long? I zipped the suitcase closed. For as long as it takes to decide whether this marriage is built on partnership or performance. He stepped forward. I never cheated on you. I know. Then why does this feel like punishment? It's not punishment, I said softly. It's consequence. He swallowed. I was blinded by opportunity, he admitted. And I was standing alone at that table, I replied. He looked at the framed wedding photo on the dresser. Do you still love me? He asked. The question landed deep. Yes, I answered honestly. But love isn't enough when respect erodes. He nodded slowly. I walked past him, suitcase in hand. He didn't stop me, because somewhere inside, he understood. This wasn't revenge. It was equilibrium. Weeks passed. We spoke occasionally, brief, controlled. He attended leadership workshops now, posted carefully worded reflections on growth and humility. Gregory resurfaced online as a resilience coach. The irony wasn't lost on me, but I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt quiet. In my new apartment, I painted the walls soft gray, bought a couch that didn't carry shared memories, cooked dinner without tension humming in the background. Peace doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives subtly, like a room finally unclenching. Ethan asked to meet one evening. We sat across from each other in a neutral cafe. He looked different, not defeated, just aware. I see it now, he said quietly. The dependency, the ego. I nodded. I should have defended you immediately. Yes, I replied. I thought it does, I said softly, but not of your integrity. He reached across the table but stopped short of touching my hand. I don't want to lose you. You already did, I answered gently. The moment I became negotiable. Silence settled between us again. Not angry, just real. I'm working on myself, he said. I hope you are, I replied. He looked at me for a long moment. Is there a chance? He asked. I held his gaze. There's always a chance for growth, I said carefully. But trust doesn't reset because someone finally understands. He nodded. That was the last time we spoke about reconciliation, because sometimes the most powerful fallout isn't someone losing their job. It's someone losing access and understanding why. It's been 8 months. I don't measure time by the calendar anymore. I measure it by quiet mornings, the kind where no one's phone buzzes at 11 p.m., the kind where dinner doesn't come with tension, the kind where I don't feel like I'm competing with a man who mistakes control for leadership. Ethan and I finalized the divorce peacefully. No courtroom drama, no shouting, just signatures and steady hands. When I placed my wedding ring on the lawyer's desk to be processed with the paperwork, I didn't cry. He had given it to me with trembling hands on a beach at sunset, and I had returned it with steady hands under fluorescent office lights. Life changes tone like that. He asked one last question before we left the building. Do you regret reporting him? I met his eyes. No. Do you regret us? That one lingered. I regret the version of us that stopped being honest, I said quietly. Not the love, the silence. He nodded. We walked in opposite directions. And for the first time, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt aligned. Gregory eventually faded from relevance. His consulting posts grew fewer. The comments under his motivational quotes grew thinner. Ethan rebuilt his career slowly. Different company, smaller role, less glamour, more stability. We don't talk anymore. Not because we hate each other, but because closure doesn't always require conversation. Sometimes it requires distance. In my apartment, I replaced the framed wedding photo with a landscape painting. Nothing symbolic, just open sky. I started sleeping deeply again. That's how I know I made the right decision. Not because he suffered, not because Gregory fell, not because I won, but because I stopped defending my boundaries and started living inside them. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not about ambition. It's about alignment. Success that demands you shrink your partner isn't success. Mentorship that undermines your marriage isn't mentorship. And love that requires you to stay silent isn't love. I wasn't jealous. I was observant. I wasn't emotional. I was precise. And when someone tells you that you could do better, sometimes the answer isn't to fight harder. Sometimes the answer is to realize you already can and walk away.